AppSheet is a no-code app development platform. It excels in replacing expensive SaaS applications, as well as old, clunky, outdated solutions. Here at Crew Technologies, we've been seeing AppSheet in action in the manufacturing industry. In this video today, we're going to check out an AI-powered MES that we have built. We'll also walk you through some of the automations that utilize AppSheet's AI tasks. Let's go ahead and check it out. Here is Crew MES. This right here, as we can see, is the desktop perspective. Whenever creating an AppSheet app, you are also automatically creating a mobile view as well as tablet view. So you can think of this as the admins and the more manager positions would be previewing the app in their offices using their desktops. However, the people on the floor in the actual individual workstations would be likely operating on it using a tablet, almost a dedicated tablet for each workstation where they could track the progress, start the individual work times. But let's go ahead and get it into this by previewing the desktop mode. So here in the desktop mode, we can see our released work orders, but let's start at the very beginning. If we click into this view right here, we have our unreleased work orders, so the ones that are queued up but not yet began work. Let's go ahead and add a new item to the queue. We're going to do a chassis for a sedan, and we're going to assign it to lot 131. We are only going to manufacture one of them at this time, and we'll hit send. Right there, we created a pending work order for a sedan chassis. Let's go ahead and as an admin, let's release this to the manufacturing line. Now that we've done that, we can see that that item has been released to the manufacturing line. However, it is not yet in progress or complete. Let's change that. We can click into the sedan chassis and from here, start the first item. But very likely, the office, the desktop perspective, wouldn't be the ones who start it. So let's go ahead and switch over to the tablet mode. Right here in tablet mode, we'll go to this first step. As you can see, we've created this sedan chassis work order. It has to go through the side frames, the wheel housing, the bulkhead, and the rear frame. And we can use this image as a little bit of a progress of how far we are into the process. Also, we can see things like how long we have been in progress, the cycle time, and the time on task. As you can see, a lot of this is 0 minutes or not started, but reload this and see if maybe that 0 minutes has changed. So since it's been released, it's been 1 minute, and we haven't started time on task, and the cycle time has not been accrued yet. So let's go ahead and change that by starting step 1, which is side frames. We'll go ahead and start work. And so imagine me, the manufacturing line worker, is beginning to, in this instance, weld the side frames and prepare them for the next step in the manufacturing process. So we can see the time that this was started, also as well as the date. And then we can see that it has not quite ended yet. We're also able to log things like downtime, which we'll be able to talk about the analytics of that in a moment. But we're also able to do QA checks. So let's just go ahead and do a QA check. This is utilizing one of the AI features that we mentioned earlier. We can simply upload an image. If you were actually using a tablet, it would give you the option to take a photo rather than selecting one. And so let's go ahead and let's just select a good weld. So to me, that one looks great. And let's hope AI agrees. All right, so we are currently sending this image over to Gemini and asking it to qualify if it's a pass or a fail. And since it is a good weld, as we can both see, it has returned back that it has passed. Now let's go ahead and try giving it a less quality weld. We'll hit this bad weld. Oh, that one's bad. So it has rust and a welding word porosity. You can see pores in the weld. Absolutely terrible weld. Gemini better reject this. So let's go ahead and wait for this. Again, it's sending it up to Gemini. It's uploading the image, and we can see how quickly it was capable of saving the image locally, sending it to the database, sending it to Gemini, having Gemini analyze the actual weld, and return back its analysis. So we can see that Gemini has determined that it was a fail because they detected a defect. And the defect text says that there was corrosion and pitting that is visible on the metal surface. All right, so human in the loop now. We've had a rejected weld, and we need to do something about it. And we need to determine, as the human, is this going to be something that we reject or rework first? With the corrosion going on, I think it's an absolute rejection. And I don't think it's a rejection for cosmetic reasons. I think it's a straight up specification failure. So let's go ahead and report it as this, and that will allow the technician to actually redo that work. So let's go back, and let's say they went ahead and redid that. Let's just real quickly go ahead and add a passing weld. Beautiful. And so we should see this one pass, and that it should be much better. We should see it go up there. So yep, it's in pass now. The work for this workstation. The technician will sign off. I'll sign off as Cameron Lepton, and we'll go over to the next thing, that is step 1. Now let's go ahead and look at it from the desktop mode. We're able to see that this image has updated, and we can see that this one is complete right here. We can go ahead and get started on the second step. Let's give it a little sync and start work. And let's go ahead and talk about what we've received in data just from that simple process right there. We can see a few different time perspectives right off the bat. We can see the time on task, we can see the cycle time, and the work in progress. So think of work in progress as capturing from it being completed all the way from it being released. Then think of cycle time as the second that the first step starts all the way till the last step ends. But then time on task, think of the same thing as cycle time. However, we are removing the time between tasks. It's only the time, the duration of the steps without including the time in between. So we can see that 1 minute difference, that 1 minute delta that we had between us starting this one and launching the second one. Also, a feature that we have in here that I'll teach you guys how to build is this update summary. And it's sending over to Gemini a combination of all the data for this individual work order, the combination of all of its work center progress, and the combination of all the details of its downtimes and its QAs. So what we can see right here is work order 10 for sedan chassis is in progress. The wheel housing stage started on February 17th at this time, and they have completed the side frames. The total duration of this work has been 7 minutes. All right, so that's a little bit of a updated summary for us to read. And let's go ahead and hit a snag. Wheel housing people, their welder completely goes out. And so let's go ahead and say that they need an electrical reset. Say these welds are coming out poor. and do a bad QA with that as well. So we'll go into related QAs and add in a bad weld. This one right here just shows total inconsistency from the welder, really justifying the electrical reset. So we'll wait for this QA to send in. And a fail. The weld is not uniform and has porosity. I would have to agree. Not only is that cosmetic, but it's a specification could not hold the strength. Let's go ahead and ask them to rework it. Some time has passed, let's say. We can click into here and view how much time has passed. Let's say it's been 1 minute. Let's just end this duration now. And we'll end duration, and we can see that it's been 1 minute. One thing that I missed to show you guys right there was whenever you guys start a downtime and then end it, you will also see that you have the ability to add additional details as well as a resolution. You can say we had downtime reworking a weld that came out poor. There we go. So we've added a resolution of how we solved that downtime. You could say that electrical reset has worked successfully and the welds are coming out much more consistent now. All right, let's end the work for this specific one and sign off on it as Cameron Lepton. And then we can check out some other things after we get this next step started and show you other parts of the app. Within the application, we also have some other views other than the primary process of creating the data, of tracking these work orders, of technician tablet in hand. Let's check out defect codes. Right here in defect codes, we can see the number of defects found in QAs and the number of defects found in downtimes. So right here on the left side, we can see for specification failure, 3 QAs caused a specification failure reject, and 0 downtimes have caused that. And then so we can see that over here, but more importantly, let's look at downtimes. So we can see the number of occurrences a downtime code has been used. So we can see electrical waiting for material has happened twice, but it's only affected the manufacturing line a total of 1 minute. Whereas right here, we see adjust copper tubing has happened twice, and that's actually affected the manufacturing line today by 20 minutes. So electrical resets, that happens a little bit more often, we can determine from this. However, they only on average take about 2 minutes to resolve. Whereas adjusting copper tubing, that is a 10-minute per occurrence issue. And so we can go ahead and click into these and see the individual records of each time a downtime has used the downtime log of electrical reset. And then let's go ahead and check out the analytics page. So this is just an idea of how to visualize some of the data that we're creating by running through this custom workflow. We're able to see things like the spread and the percentages of occurrences for downtimes. And so we can see that the largest issue is electrical resets. But we also know from that other perspective, we see another dimension of really the adjusting copper tube is the biggest issue, because maybe we should be checking this by not occurrences, but downtime, elapsed time total. And then right here, we see QA defects. And so from here, we can see that 10 QAs have passed. These QAs right here have been rejected and been asked to be reworked or total rejection. And then one of them has not been addressed by the admin. Right here, we can see the comparison of QAs passed compared to QAs failed. And then right here, we can see the total number of workstations completed for each of the different workstations. Whenever a product goes all the way beginning to end, all these numbers, hopefully by end of day, if all the lines have been completed, all these numbers should be the same because every single product needs to go through each of their required lines. All right, let's go back to here and let's finish this production. Sign off on this as Cameron Lupton. Go into here and jump into the final task, and we'll submit some QAs. All right, let's do another good weld. Half of this video is just me showing off these cool welds. It's pretty crazy how good welding people can make. So that very good there. Those should both pass with flying colors. And that should tip the scale of passes to fails. And so there we go. Let's end work and sign off. So this right here was work order 7 that we actually switched over to halfway through. And if we go over here, we can see that pass count is increasing while this fail count is staying the same. One thing to note inside of here, which is really cool, you can actually go in here and you can filter it based off of all these things. You can even filter, if we were to expose it, the specific technician. We could filter this whole view by the technician of when Cameron is working a workstation, what are these analytics looking like? What is Cameron's QA pass fails? What are Cameron's completed workstations? Whenever he has a QA, what are the results of them? Does it usually result in a full reject or just a rework? What downtimes does Cameron run into the most often? How quickly does he resolve those downtimes? All this application does is produce some really good data that allows you to not only run your manufacturing line, but also improve it by identifying and diagnosing which of the downtimes happen most often. Maybe you need so many electrical resets that you need to really refresh your power in your building, or so many electrical resets that you need to refresh the individual welding units that you have within the building. So a lot of cool things. This has been a demo of how this application works. I hope you thought it was really cool. Let's go ahead and get into teaching you these features. First, we're going to get into QA checks. All right, so to add this QA feature, let's highlight what is required for it. First, they click into a work center. They're doing work on it, the technician this is, and they complete their work. They hit QA check. They take a picture of their weld, and let's select the bad one and hit save. This image gets sent up to Gemini with a prompt and a list of fields for it to fill in. And whenever Gemini looks at it and responds back, it groups it into either pass or fail. If it is a fail, it's going to give a description of why it failed. And then we want to also from there add human in the loop, where we are required to choose which path of resolution we should choose. So specification failure. However, if it passes, we want it to not include these fields right here. All right, so let's build this out. So we have this other version of the MES where if we go into one of these, there is no QA yet. And if we go into the database, there is no QA table. And then finally, inside the data tab, there's no signs of QA so far. So we are starting from scratch right here on implementing this feature. And we're going to talk through how we're going to go ahead and create a new table. And we'll call this one QA. Rename it to QA. And we want an ID. We want to reference the work order ID. So we'll do WO ID. We want the work center that this is happening at. And then we may add to this over time, but we want an image. We want a result, so a pass or a fail. The description of what the defect is. So defect info. So I am doing this not exactly the way I did it the first time. So I am thinking out loud and sharing with you guys the fields that I would want to do if I were doing this for my first time. We'll include a timestamp, but we also want to do the path of how we resolve it. We'll say human in the loop. So I'll do HITL and then decision. All right, add this into the AppSheet app. And so we will go into here and we'll say MES built. Go ahead and add QA. All right, we have this QA table and we get all these data types set up for this table. So we want to hide the ID just because it's going to be a unique ID that gets generated, and that's just for AppSheet to see. Work order is going to be a ref to the work order table. And then we also want work center to be a ref to the work center table. These two things are going to be auto-filled, so that's work center template where you want work center. These are going to be auto-filled, and every time we see these individual records, it's going to be in perspective of that work center or in perspective of that work order. So I am going to mark it not showable currently. Next, we want to make sure that the image is an image. Result is going to be pass fail. So we'll go to enum and we'll select the options as pass or fail. Let's hit done. And then defect info will be a text field. Timestamp will be date time, and that should be now. So that's recording. Whenever we create this record, it's going to record the current date time. And then human in the loop decision, we'll call it just decision. And so let's add the display names for this. So we'll call this one decision. For this one, we'll call it timestamp is good, so I'm going to keep that as is. Defect info, that's good. Result, that is good. And I think all these are good. So we'll keep those data types the same. And let's hit save. All right, so we got a few warnings, and that's just saying because of us hiding these three columns, they will not be searchable. And when I say searchable, I'm just saying that whenever they're in a column like this, you won't be able to find those three columns inside of the filterable search, or you won't be able to type in the values into here to narrow down the records. All right, so we have our schema in place and we're ready to go. We want to do one little bit of logic, and we only want the defect info and the human in the loop decision to show if the result is fail. So we want the show column. If you aren't seeing this flask right here for the show columns, you're gonna want to click into the edit pencil. So we'll go ahead and edit pencil the defect info, hit this flask, and we want to only show this column when the result is equal to fail. So only whenever Gemini has determined that this QA has failed. All right, and we're going to do the same thing for the human in the loop decision. There's no decision to be made if it passes. So let's only show that whenever it fails, and then we'll hit save. Next, we want to go ahead and create a form for whenever we are creating these QA records. So go to views, and we'll create a new reference view, and I'll call this new QA. And for this new QA, it's going to be using the QA table. It's going to be a form, and we only want the image in there. So we're going to delete all these other things and then hit save. If I show that in preview real quick, that form is literally just uploading an image. All right, So now we want to go into these detail views of these work centers and make sure that the QA thing is showing up. We can see that downtime logs are showing up. However, these QAs are not. So let's go ahead and go to the editor of this detail view by clicking this hyperlink. Let's add a new column, scroll down to related QAs and hit select one column. And if we scroll down, it has moved it all the way to the bottom. I think it would look better if it was right next to downtime logs. All right, so let's go ahead and hit save. If the user is wanting to actually create a QA, they're totally capable of going down here and hitting add, and that's good. I like that, but I like the idea of having it right here with report downtime as well. So let's add an action button over there as well. So we'll hit add new action and create new action. We'll call this one QA check. This action is going to be executed from the Work Center page. What we want to do is navigate the user. So we'll say go to another view within this app. And we want to take them to that form. So let's do link to form. And we want to also pre-fill some values. So I'll say link to form. And the first value that we have to put in here is the view name. And so we called this new QA. Like that. And now we want the column that we want to fill in followed by the value. And then if we want another column, do another column followed by a value, and we can do that as many times as we want. And then there's an optional parameter at the end of the app name, but we don't need to do that. So let's do some line breaks. That way we can format this a little better, and we'll do the key value pairs is what they call it. And so first we want to do the work order. So if we open up the QAs, we see that work order ID is what we want to fill in first. We want to bring in the work order of this individual work center. For this column inside of QA, we want to fill it in with the work center's work order. All right. And then for the work center ID of the QA, we want to fill it in with the key of work center, which is WCID, the same. So we'll go ahead and do that. And we don't actually want to send it to another app. And so we aren't going to use that final variable inside of this link to form expression. So there we go. We have our expression. Essentially what we're doing is we're going to this form and we're pre-filling the work order with a work order of the work center that we're QAing. And then we're pre-filling the work center with the key of the work center we're triggering this from. All that to say, hit save. Go ahead and do display name. We'll say QA check. And then within here, I like to do this little badge. It's like somebody signing off on something. I think it goes great with QA checks. All right. And then behavior, we want it to always be true. You could make it where if it's the active work center that shows up, but I'm just going to always keep it there. And let's hit save. All right. So let's go ahead and test this out. We can go into this individual work order, go into here, start the work, start the QA, and create our first QA. Oh, I did not select it properly. We'll go ahead and open that file and hit save. So that's a good one. We don't have any automation set up, and so it's not going to do anything to this. It's just going to be an image. We haven't built that automation yet, but we can see that it's showing well and that it's properly uploading. And right here, we can confirm that we are capturing the work order ID and the work center ID, which is great. Now we need the automation to run where it updates these things right here. All right, let's go ahead and talk about how we do that. So going back into AppSheet right here, we can go ahead and create an automation. So the automation that we want to create, we'll go ahead and just name it Generate QA. Generate QA results. Let's do QA results. That makes sense. Configure event. We want to create a new event, and this one is going to be new QA created. And we want this to only run whenever a QA table record is added. We want this to run always. We could say when image is not blank or something, but really we should just make images required. But let's go ahead and say what step we want to do. We want to create a new step, and then we want to go to AI tasks. Inside of AI tasks, we want to extract. We have more videos on extract rows, categorize, and summarize, especially our webinars if you want to check those out. But the input column is going to be the image, the data source of which that they are making all these decisions based off is going to be the image. And so what columns do we want to fill out based off of the image? We want to fill out the result. We want to fill out the defect info, and that's it. So let's go ahead and give it a little bit of a static prompt. So for result, we want it to say if the weld is of good quality, then pass the result. If it is poor, then fail the result. All right. I'm just typing. It's not a science. I mean, you should be descriptive. However, it is very smart and it does a great job on a lot of this stuff. And so I'm not doing a perfect, what I'm saying is I'm not doing a perfect template of what I'm saying. I am just kind of ad-libbing it and seeing if it works. And usually it does, but if I'm not liking the results very well, I'll make changes to it and make incremental changes. But yeah, for defect info, I'll say write a sentence of what is wrong with this weld. I'll say only if failed, write a sentence of what is wrong with this weld. If it passes, just say passed. All right, that should be good. All right, and then we'll go ahead and hit save. And let's see if this is working how we would want. Let's go into the Crew MES build, and let's go ahead and add that same QA. Let's reload it, make sure that this bot is running. We'll go ahead and hit a good weld, hit save. And so we've uploaded one of these ones. Let's see which one it is, but sending to Gemini. Gemini's hopefully running off that ad. And then there we go. We can see that this one passed, and this is currently not showing any of the additional information. Let's just see and debug if on the other screen it is showing up properly in the database. Okay, so it passed and it's passed. Oh, I'm totally wrong. If it is a pass, this field and this field should not show. So really what we need to do a better test is we need to do a QA that fails. So let's do one of these bad welds. Hit save. Hopefully Gemini says that one fails because that one does not look effective. All right, fail. There are porosity defects in this weld. That is great. Okay, so now what we're missing is that human in the loop decision. Let's go ahead and add that because right now we have no way of making that decision. And so what we want to do is we can track down that view by going into here, creating a QA real quick that fails or anything, click into it, and then we can edit this QA detail view. Inside this QA detail view, we want a quick edit column of this right here, but we can also, let's go into quick edit and do the human in the loop decision. And so that should be showing up at the bottom, but that's only for fails that will show up. So let's go ahead and see if that has already worked. All right, let's just give this a reload, and hopefully the decision right here shows up as a quick input. So right here, we can add the reject but we don't want it to be a text field. We want the decision to be a button selection. So let's go into the data for QAs and then go into here and say enum. And let's add some things. Specification. Specification failure, and we'll say this is a reject. And then we'll do the same thing. And then we'll say rework. So do we want them to completely restart or for them to rework it? And then this one right here, we'll say this is cosmetic. And then we'll do the same thing, but for rework. And then we'll hit save, and hopefully that will likely turn into a dropdown. So I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to change it from auto, which is what it would select. I'm going to change it to buttons. Actually, let's do a stack button. The stack button will be nice and drop down. That way there's just not an extra click with the drop down. And so right here, we can give this a reload and we can expect it to be the drop downs. Great. And so we can say that's a reject, cosmetic, so on. Let's move this up where it's right under fail, but above the other things. All right. So we go into one of these, go into this, go into one of these. Let's go into the failed one, and let's move human in the loop decision right under result. All right, and then we'll hit save. And then let's go through the full process one more time, just to make sure we've got this. All right, so we are in this one right here. We want to go ahead and add a new fail. And so we will add this bad weld right here. Totally terrible weld. And so it's this one. We're waiting for Gemini to give us the result. Worked. It was a fail. Porosity and cracking. Totally agree. That is a full reject. All right. And now let's lastly do the same thing, but with a pass. We'll go ahead and do QA check and do a good weld. That one is great. And so we can sit here and wait for the pass to come in. And there we go. We got the pass. And so that was the AI feature that we just built. Hopefully you can think of different ways to make this maybe not a QA check for welding, but for another step in your manufacturing process or for your industry you have and how it could be useful. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next feature. And then the second feature that we're going to be working on is this update summary. This utilizes Gemini to create a summary of not only this work order, but all the work center progress that's occurred during this work order, as well as the individual downtimes and the QAs to build a story about this work order. And so let's run this update summary for this work order number 10. And so it's sending up that all the data of all those records to Gemini, returning back a summary. And we can see, oh, whoa, the rear frame work center has a motor overheating, causing a fire and halting production. All right. So that's eventful. We can see that actually happened right here in motor overheating, warning the whole work center has caught fire. Work can't be continued. All right, so let's go ahead and see how we would build this. So at the very basis, what we want to do is first summarize the work order. But first we need a way to trigger this. And if we go into the work order table, we can see that we've added a update AI column, ? And it is a yes, no. And whenever a new record gets created, it is automatically set to as false. Okay, so the first step is we're going to want to go to the work order table. And under the work order table, to trigger this feature, we have this update AI feature. We have it set to a yes and no data type with the initial value of false. So let's go ahead and save that and check out what we need to do next. So ideally what we want is you to click into this right here and there be an action button for you to trigger this to yes. And when that gets triggered to yes, we want it to summarize the feature. And so we need to create an action, and this will be happening in the work order table. So we'll click add right there, and we'll say summarize work order. Okay, this is happening in the work order. I am going to just make it simple and just say this is to true. All right, so that sets that to true, just like that. And the display name that I added is pretty good already. And then I'm going to use the sparkle just to kind of make it look like Gemini. Let's go ahead and hit save. And so right now what it's doing is I click into here, I hit summarize work order, and it's just going to set that work order 1 right here. It's going to set the update AI to true. Let's go ahead and change that back to false first. Let's start this build. And so we need to go ahead and create a new bot. And this is going to happen on the work order table. So we'll say generate summary for work orders. And I actually want to move that over to this rename. So right there. And the event is going to be summary requested. And we know, we just want to name it. We'll configure event, create new event, go to the event name and paste AI summary requested. Okay, this is requested whenever a work order is updated. And this gets a little tricky. Let's go ahead and talk you through this for the first time if this is your first time. There's a feature within AppSheet that is underscore this row before and this row after. This is only utilized within bots, but this allows us to return the value of the update AI column before the change. So before the change, we want it to have equaled false. And then after the change, we've wanted it to equal true. So we'll say that after it's equaled true, just like that. And we want both these conditions to be true, so we're going to be wrapping them in an AND expression. So let's go ahead and walk you through what we just did. This bot will only trigger its event when it's an update to the work order table under the behavior condition that before the change, the update AI was equal to false. And then after the change occurred, it was set to true. And so this is going to allow us to set it back to false after this without it being an issue and retriggering infinitely off of every single change. Only whenever they click that button, essentially, is it going to run. Let's hit save. And now this way that we're going to do it really quickly is really rudimentary. We're going to improve it as we go to give better and better results. So we can see the results improve as we go. All right, so this will be Gemini summarize, just like that. And we want to instead do the summarized AI task. All right, and then the input columns that we want to summarize with, we don't have a lot to summarize based off right here, but we could do the cycle time display. We'll do the time on task display, the title display. We can just give it as many points as we can. Let's do the planned quantity. Let's make sure we feed it what product it is. And yeah, let's see what this is. We can do node instructions right off the bat. After that runs, we want it to set it back to false. That way it's ready to be ran again. So we'll say reset update AI question mark. And so we want to update that column back to what it was. And so we'll do run a data action, and then we'll say set row values. And then we want to go to update AI question mark and type in false. We're setting it back. Hit save and hit save. This is MVP of this feature. Let's go into here and let's hit summarize. So we have this summary that is probably better than what it will come up with, but it's sending it to Gemini, those values, and coming back with a summary. We should see it update, hopefully. I don't know if that worked. Let's try it on another record that hopefully does not have a summary. Let's do it right here. Oh, you know what? I did not select what column I want it to flow into. So let's go into here and let's select this right here. We want it to do the AI summary. That was an important step. Now that that's in there, let's go into here and then let's reload and summarize. So for work order 3, the summary is the column values are going up and the summary is coming back in from Gemini. And we should see it right here. Yeah, there we go. Work order 3 for 2 sedan exhaust systems have been completed. The task took 17 hours and 28 minutes. And so currently, we're giving it a limited amount of data about the work order. We're not giving it all the columns that might be useful. We're just selecting them kind of haphazardly. But also, what we're not doing is we're not passing in the data of the work centers, of the downtime, of the related QAs, or any of that. It doesn't have any perspective of these actual critical variables within a work order. So let's go ahead and make sure it first gets a complete picture of a work order. And so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of mimic something called a JSON object. And we're going to create a virtual column within AppSheet for us to pass all the data that we want into a single column to Gemini. And so we will add virtual column and say Gemini, we'll say Gemini summary or Gemini details. And then inside of here, we want to kind of concatenate a lot of the data that we have into a single summary. And so we want to, in order to make it kind of like a JSON object, we're going to do it like this with all the details of the work order inside of these curly brackets. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's do a line break at the beginning of the ending of the open and at the beginning of the close. And so we want a ampersand right there. And then we want to add the details of the work order right here. And so we want to do key value pairs. And so we want to do something like product. So we want to type out product. And then we want to do a colon and then space. And then we want to actually concatenate that static text with the product value, just like that. And then we want to concatenate that with a line break. And so as you can see, what we're kind of doing is we are creating this object encapsulated into these curly brackets. And each row we are putting in a column and its value. That way AppSheet has a good understanding of the full picture of this. And this idea will get really powerful once we move on to bringing in child records as well. And so let's just go through a few of these. Let's say lot number. And let's, in here, put in the lot number. I'm going to go ahead and copy this one as a template for me to copy paste. And so I'll paste in that one, and we want the status. And that uses the status column, obviously. Planned quantity. So we'll just say quantity, QTY. And we'll say planned quantity. All right, and let's scroll down to see the next value. Cycle time, I would like the display one that we use more. Let's do created at and released at. So let's say requested. And right here, we'll say released. We requested it whenever it was created. We know what that means. But it was released when it was released at. Work completed at. So we'll say work completed. Work completed at. There we go. Let's see what other columns we like. Let's shorten that. Is down is good. So we'll give it the status is the experiencing downtime. So if it's actively experiencing downtime, it will know. And then, yeah, we want the cycle time display and we want the time on task. Yes. So we want a cycle time. This is all super helpful stuff for Gemini to have. Okay, and ampersand, and paste in this last one. This one is time on task. And then time on task display. And so let's go ahead and see this full expression. It's putting all these values inside of these curly brackets, and let's see if this shows us something useful. So yeah, that looks pretty good. We can see the product, we can see the lot number, status, quantity, and so on. And that is a very cohesive, comprehensive picture to paint for the AI. Now, for that bot, we can go to here and remove actually all of these columns and replace it with just Gemini details. And so that Gemini details is enough for it to summarize everything important, just utilizing that one column. And that column does not need to be visible within the application. It just needs to be visible for this bot. And so we'll hide it from the application and hit save. We might not see a drastic improvement on the summaries, but let's go ahead and request the new one. So it's passing that new column up, and yeah, not a ton of improvement. I mean, maybe not improvement at all quite yet, but we've made a scalable solution where we can start implementing these child records in there as well. Okay, so maybe, I don't know if that first one utilized that new column, but I think after I resynced the app, I think it utilized the new way of doing it, and it seems to have brought in the lot number and other columns that it might have not had access to before. All right, so now we want to bring in work centers. And then when we bring in work centers, we want to bring in related QAs and related downtimes. And so that is going to require us to do the same things that we just did for QAs and downtimes and work centers. And so I'm going to speed through that a little quickly, and feel free to follow along. So we're going to go to our work centers. And this one is not going to be a virtual column. This one is going to be a static column. And that's because we only want it to update when there's changes, not just constantly calculating like the work order does, because it has to bring in from other columns. So with this one being a static column, we can go ahead and do that same thing that we have of bring in this. So I'll go ahead and wrap that in parentheses, in quotation marks, do the ampersand, wrap that in quotation marks, and there we go. And we want to find the name for the work center. Where's the label? So right here, work center display is what we want. So we'll say WC display, and that will give us the step that we are in. Description might be useful. So we'll say description. So we're just thinking, what is useful for us to feed Gemini that an admin would actually want to see in here? We can do start task and end task. So we can say start, And we want unit start. And then we want to go in here and do end. And we in here want unit end. Work completed by, that could be useful. We'll paste that in and say completed by. Completed by. There we go. I think that is probably all we need for this. Let's go ahead and hit save. Now that we have these Gemini details for the work centers, we can go back to work orders and go down to our Gemini details, and then we can go into work center right here. We can go in here, add another column. And what we want to do is we want to do a list of child records. So work centers. And then we'll kind of tell AppSheet this is a step. These are the steps. And then in here, we want to do a line break. And we want to bring in all the individual records. And so from in here, we want the related, not QAs, but the related work centers. And those aren't showing up in here. And let's paste in that related work centers. And then let's bring in each of their Gemini details. Hit save. What we can do for now is expose this, that way we can see the progress as we're working on it. But let's go ahead and show it in here. It's actually hidden because we've toggled it off. Let's go and show it back. Go back to this detail view, add that column back in, Gemini details, select column and hit save. And then let's see what that JSON object thing that we're doing looks like. And so we'll reload this page. We'll go to here and we see this Gemini details right here. And for some reason, it looks like it's failing, but it should be working. So let's go ahead and, the reason why it's not working is because it hasn't changed those values yet. So what we can do is we can actually create one of these new ones, hit save, and these work centers should generate new ones because they now have that expression. Okay, so these work centers potentially have their own now, and yes, there we go. We can see for the Gemini details of this, we see all these records. And then we are also seeing that for work centers, product, cycle time, time on task. And then here, we need a line break between work centers and time on task. But what we can see right here is that each of these sub records are representing each of the work centers. And so we can see work center 1 side frames, wheelhousing, and we can see the actual internal details about this. So let's go ahead and correct that line break. We'll go into here and re-add that line break right there. Yeah, so we need a line break right there and an ampersand. And so now if we hit save and hit save, and then reload this, we should see the line break between work centers. Yeah, there we go. So we see work center steps, and then we see all the individual work centers inside there. What I'm going to do real quickly is I'm going to do the same things, and I'll show you guys when I'm done. I'm going to do the same things to QA and to downtime, and then I'm going to bring them into the work orders Gemini details, and then we can see what it looks like from there. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. All right, so just like that, I've gone into QA and I've added a new column called Gemini Details, and I've added all the characteristics of each QA for Gemini to receive, and that's results, the defect info, decision, and a timestamp. We called it a decision because the app users can learn and understand that. We're not physically training this model, so I wanted to make sure they understood that for this QA, that it is a manager making a decision on how to resolve this task. So we'll go ahead and hit save. We've also done the downtime. And so for downtime, we have this right here. And we want to also make this a long text. And so we'll make that a long text like that. And in here, we are capturing the work order, the work center, the reason of downtime, the additional details, if there's been a resolution, and how long the downtime has occurred for. So we'll go ahead and hit save on that. And then the last step that we need to do is we need to import these records and these details into the work order, just like we did for the work centers. And so it's actually gonna be really easy for us to duplicate this. Right here, we have work centers, and we want to just capture that stuff right here, and let's paste this twice. And so we have work centers, and then we have QA checks. And right here, we'll say logged downtime. All right. And so instead of, for this one, we want the related QAs. So that one right there. And we want the Gemini details from the related QAs. And for log downtime, we want the related downtimes, I believe they're called, related downtimes. There we go. And so if we go ahead and hit save, this work order that we just created, if we reload it, we see that it's included this whole thing that says QA checks and log downtime, but they're blank currently. Let's go ahead and update these and see how they change. Let's add a start date time to work center 1. So let's start that. Let's report a downtime for a defect, hit save, and let's do a QA check as well. Let's do a pass and a fail. So we'll do a ugly weld and we'll do a beautiful weld. Just like that. And so we should expect a pass and a fail. And we should see a downtime that we add and so on. So a pass and a fail. And then let's go ahead and end that downtime. We need to add the defect code for, since we selected defect. That's only 29 seconds, so it might show up as 0 minutes. And then we'll end the work, sign off of it, and then go back here, and we can see how this is updated. We can see work order 1 has been completed by cam@crewtech.net. We can see the start and finish times, and then if we scroll down, we can see log downtime of us logging that downtime of the defect. So that's really useful. And now AppSheet and Gemini have access to that. We have QA checks, and we can see that it did not bring in quite yet the pass and fail, but that will get updated as we go. And so let's go ahead and reload this. And we don't need to configure the AppSheet bot anymore. All we have to do is just update summary, and it's going to all of a sudden have access to all those other columns that it didn't have access to before. And so it's sending up not only the parent record details, but also all the downtimes and all the QAs. But a defect was logged for this step, but overall work order is not experiencing downtime. So that is true. The downtime that we did log was just the defect. And so very useful summary, and you can think of tons of ways to push this feature for more than just manufacturing. You can have this in your CRM where you're able to bring in the contact details of this person, bring in the details of their company, bring in all your past CRM activities and summarize, feed it some additional information like I want you to only summarize this past month of activities and then return an activity summary of each client using all the activities that you've logged in your CRMs. This idea is applicable to all industries, and we'd love to hear you guys in the comments talk about different ideas on how you can use this feature either for a MES or outside of one. And so let's recap what we've learned. While today we used manufacturing setup, keep in mind that these features, especially the AI integrations, aren't just for the shop floor. You can push this tech into almost any industry. Imagine this in a CRM where Gemini instantly summarizes years of contact history, company details, past activities to prep you for your next sales meeting. Or think about field services where AI could analyze photos, damage reports, or maintenance needs instantly. AppSheet is about replacing old, clunky, outdated solutions with something that actually works for your specific workflow. Whether you're in manufacturing, sales, logistics, or whatever, AppSheet can help you. If you want to dive into the logic of this application, I've included a link to the template in the description below, so you can copy it and get started. And last, if you're ready to upgrade your citizen development skills, stick around and subscribe. We have plenty of more content like this.